Hi, it's me. I'm hoping that I'm able to edit this part on to the last part because my camera just sort of stopped and I'm not sure why. New at this. But what I was talking about was this gentleman. He did destroy property. I mean, he drove through the circular driveway. He, took out some bushes and plants and all of that. And the police, because this guy was rich and known in the community, was like, oh, well, just, I was just absolutely saying that you're going to let a man who cannot drive, he's impaired, go out on the main street. What if he kills someone? And I wanted to know their names. So all of a sudden, they decided that they would have to do something. And they took him to the drunk tank, as they called it. And they made him sleep it off. And he doesn't really have any family in the area. He does. I don't want to get into all of it. So there was nobody to come to pick him up. So he had to go sleep it off. And then, but they did call a distant relative. And, so they were aware of the situation. And believe me, this gentleman was not happy with that. And with that, I forgot to tell you about the dogs. I got waylaid about the dogs. What he used to do was come in and kick the dogs and yell at the dogs, okay? The other thing he did was he would go, his wife was up on the locked Alzheimer's unit, and he would go up there and call them all, and please, I don't use this word, but retards, So everyone said, well, ban him from the building, But to me, his wife's only link to reality was him. And she brightened up when he came. So I did not have the heart to do that. So what we did was, he was only allowed to visit once a week with a staff person present downstairs in this special area. Things seemed to be going well. He was told if he showed up drunk, he had to leave. There were a couple times he showed up drunk and he wasn't allowed in. So things were going really, really well. And I thought, maybe we should increase it to twice a week. He's doing better. So one day I was in there, it was a Saturday. And yes, a Saturday. I mean, those kind of jobs, although they pay well, anyway. It's like 12-hour days, sometimes 7 days a week. But I was in there, and the secretary was there, and it was in this little waiting area, which was, had a glass thing that you slid open. And he came in, and I was at the copying machine, and he was asking to see his wife, and it wasn't his day to visit. And he had this strange look in his eye, and I noticed that he pulled a gun. He was pulling a gun out of his jacket pocket. And I said to the secretary, run. And she left and ran. And he was definitely there for me. He held the gun at my head. I couldn't leave this little room. He held the gun at my head, and he pulled the trigger, and it jammed. And as he was pulling the trigger, he said, this is your, and I'm not going to say the F word, but you get it. This is your effing day to die, Nancy. So he then pointed the gun at me again, and he pointed it at my head, and he said, this is your effing day to die. He pulled the trigger, and it jammed. Sorry, I had to take a little break there. And it jammed. And he was running around trying to get into this little room. It was so small, like he would was leaning over it, pointing at me, and I was thinking he was gonna actually jump over where that window was, but he was throwing computers at me, he was throwing stuff at me, and apparently they called the police, and he heard the police, all the sirens and everything, and I forgot to tell you, I called 911 too, and they had already been notified, but they told me to stay on the phone with them and not to move. And I was hiding under a table, but it was near one of the doors, and I was really afraid he was going to shoot through the door because he kept kicking at the door, kicking at the door. So he hears all the sirens outside, and he was very drunk. And he went outside for some odd reason. He decided, oh, wow, what the heck's going on out there, Let me go check that out. And he went out, and he stood in front of the place, held the gun up in the air, shot it, fired it, and it worked. So everyone says that, there was an angel watching me. And I think, maybe there was. Maybe there was an angel watching me, and I'm very fortunate to be alive. However, with this incident, it changed my life completely. It changed my life completely. I don't think people understand about post-traumatic stress disorder. They don't. And post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, it doesn't go away. You can go to therapy, you can get treatment, you can get medications, you can learn, how to manage these symptoms, but there are certain times, certain things can trigger you. Now, I want to do a whole other thing on post-traumatic stress disorder, a whole other video. This is my story, but let me tell you what happened to me during this election, in the last couple weeks, and after the election. I became very frightened. I could not believe, as a woman, these things were being brushed under the table, that it was okay to grab women and to, that whole, I don't know how to explain it to you. I mean, I grew up, and someday I'll talk about what it was like before people were cognizant of women and their feelings, and that they weren't just pieces of garbage or items or possessions or whatever. But I'm not going to get into that. But let me tell you the effect it had on me. I was frightened. I was frightened in my neighborhood, because down the street there are people with these big Trump signs up. And one of my neighbor's kids, who's in college, he's really cool, he's our gardener now, he said, well, I think a lot of people here will vote for Trump, but they don't want to put it on their, anything on their lawn, any kind of sign, because people will think they're racists. And I said, well, if the shoe fits, I mean, really. I couldn't go out of my house. I had agoraphobia, which means being frightened to leave your home. I didn't want to leave. I would go to church and not go out for the next week for church, or if I had a class. I couldn't sleep. I had insomnia. I was anxious. I had nightmares. I had night terrors. And these are all the things that go with PTSD. Now, it's been a few weeks now, a couple weeks, and I'm starting to get better. I went to my doctor, who's, I told him, I said, on the night of the election, I truly cried. I cried because I really just couldn't comprehend how a person who made fun of women and made fun of people that are handicapped and all of that. I mean, and I'm not even sure. I mean, I don't want to. But this was not my America. My America is different than that. And I'm just hoping that that was all a big facade, to get a certain base to follow him and vote for him. But anyway, my psychiatrist said, he was very sad as well, and that there is a increase of PTSD survivors who were having increased symptoms. Because I thought I was a little bit crazy, you know what I mean? I'm like, and he said, no, absolutely not. He said, I can't tell you how many people have come into my office and said this. I don't, maybe to some people it's not a big deal, but it flashes back to entitled white men with money being able to do whatever they want to do, say whatever they want to say without ramifications. Where this guy is, he probably passed away by now, but he went to jail. And I have a relative that is a guard at the jail, and it got back to me that he was being taken advantage of. And I really believe this guy has problems with alcohol and dementia and cardiac problems that weren't being treated. And he wasn't getting his medicine, and he wasn't getting treated. So I was in touch with the legal team, and I said, that doesn't make me sleep at night, knowing this man is suffering, at the hands of others. And I asked if they would put him in some kind of locked facility where he could get treatment for his dementia, for his drinking, for whatever else he had. I asked, could they please put him there? And they did. And people say to me, why would you do that? Why? Let somebody beat the crap out of him. Let him starve. Let him this. I'm like, here's the deal. I'm a Christian. And all this karma stuff people talk about, well, it's karma. They deserve it. He did something wrong. And he's not going to get out, but he deserves humane treatment. And he deserves to be treated like a person. And so, with that here, I'm going to end this. And the next one, I'm going to talk about PTSD and its symptoms. So, thanks for listening. Bye.